I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. How you been?
Busy. I finished up teaching at like 3:55, got set up. We're starting a second program. So like from like the ground up. So like our current program is like, Ruby and Rails with a little kind of nod to like JavaScript front ends and stuff along those lines. And so the second program is all like JavaScript and Ember and a little bit of React, and like with a nod a little bit to Node, but like a completely new program kind of focused on the stuff that I was kind of like building into the curriculum. The general overarching thing is, like from the ground up, the full 4 modules, 7 months, like new topics, like old format, new topics. And so I'm kind of teaching the current stuff while also like designing that, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah, so your brain has to be in 2 different places at once.
Yeah.
And that's exciting. Get more focus. You're teaching Ember and React?
Yes.
Interesting.
I feel really strongly about this too. Like, I feel like both have a place.
Yeah.
And like that one is, and it's funny. Like, I don't know if you've seen all those like React is at the point where all those blog posts are coming out now, where it's like, I have too much choice. And what is the right way to get set up? And
if only there was a JavaScript framework that helped me with that.
And it's just like, like Ember CLI figured this all out. Like, honestly, 18 months ago?
Yeah.
More. Right? Like, is this really? Are you all like you all went to React because it was lightweight, and I don't have to deal with all this bulk, and now you're all building applications where you need it, and it's like, But
this is currently and has been and will be Real World Ember, where we interview developers who are awesome but not necessarily famous. Although you did give a speech at EmberConf.
I did.
You're at the edge of fame for this.
Prairies. The suburbs, if you will.
I guess I won't interview only people who aren't famous. That would limit.
I mean, I feel like if a famous person knocks down your door and says, "Hey, could you interview me?" I think you should do it. I don't think you should like pigeonhole yourself.
Yeah. I don't want to niche down too hard.
Yeah.
Okay, so famous people listening, this is now open to you.
Yeah, like wide open, like this is your time.
Yeah, I mean, like we prefer people who aren't famous, but you got to get it on the real world Ember action.
Yeah, if you're a famous person listening to this, you're thinking, oh my, I can't do this because I'm too famous. Like it's okay.
Yeah, we'll make an exception. Okay, so we start off this conversation with a lot of context missing. I knew it, you knew it, but the listeners don't necessarily know it. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and about Turing School?
Yeah, so my name is Steve Kinney, and I currently live in the city of Denver. I've been here for about 18 months now or so, about a year and a half, give or take a month or two. I came out here from New York City to work at the Turing School of Software and Design. Starting out as an instructor these days, I am co-director of academics. And so what is Turing? It's a 7-month developer training program, so quite a bit longer than a lot of the other programs. We currently have our kind of first program is a full stack Ruby, Rails, and JavaScript program where it's broken up into 4 modules. They learn like spending just 6 weeks focusing on like the fundamentals of like programming, like focusing at that point on Ruby, but like looking at like algorithms, like they build linked lists and merge sort and binary search trees and stuff along those lines, and just kind of like just the fundamentals of programming and object-oriented programming using Ruby. In the second module, they go on to like finally like build some web applications, first in Sinatra and then eventually using a little known framework called Ruby on Rails. In the third module, they focus on like what we like to call professional Rails applications. So not only is it like my first Rails app, it's also like dealing with performance and security and creating APIs and stuff along those lines. And during that time, they do a individual project, which always becomes a very like JavaScript heavy project because if you like give anyone the choice of what do you want to build, they tend to be these kind of like rich client side experiences.
Right,
so we also kind of at that point
begin.
Yeah, it's like you're all going to be, it's basically one of those things where it's like, you're all going to be experimenting with this JavaScript thing anyway. So, let's show you how to do it, right?
So the fourth one is doing the JavaScript heavy stuff, the fourth module?
Yeah. Yeah, the fourth module these days actually has very little Rails in it these days. It is predominantly JavaScript, and like kind of going back in almost like a module one like revisitation where we go really, really deep into like the fundamentals of the JavaScript programming language.
Right. So at the end of the third module, you sort of let them flail around in JavaScript, and then you go in and like teach it to them once they're ready.
Yeah. Yeah, and going everything from like how prototypal inheritance works to what this is at any given moment.
Oh, that's difficult.
To how like currying and partial application work, asynchronous programming and stuff along those lines, and kind of like do it right, and give them the foundation to kind of build things, and then touching upon some of the frameworks and kind of building real-time applications with WebSockets and stuff along those lines as well.
Mm-hmm. So that's a lot to pack in there. I'd sort of assumed the fourth one was just Ember.
It always had an Ember component. It's not just Ember, though, because I think one thing we found out is, like, you end up with people who, like, I think this is, like, sometimes a criticism of, like, some Rails developers as well, where they know Ember or they know Rails, but they don't know JavaScript or Ruby.
Right.
So we try to make sure that that's not the case, that they also understand like the actual programming language that they're using, so that when things go off the rails a little bit, they understand the medium that they're working with.
Pun intended?
No, pun not intended, but I'm okay with it. Pun not intended, but proud of it anyway.
Accents happen, and sometimes they're good.
Yeah.
So, so they get that very deep foundation. Interesting. Yeah, like I was just talking to someone else who's from another boot camp who's now taking a CS course because she didn't get that in her boot camp.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that, because we are a 7-month program, we kind of have the ability to do that, right? Like, and kind of go deeper into these topics.
Right, you have more flexibility with your schedule.
As long. Yeah.
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 And you guys now you're getting even more flexibility with your schedule, right? Since you're splitting up into 2 different programs.
Yeah, so we're starting a second program May 9th, is the kind of like target date. And that will be a solely front-end program with, kind of like 4 brand new modules that I've kind of been outlining and writing curriculum for over the same like length of time, right, running concurrently with the other program.
Do we get to know what those modules are? Can you...
Absolutely.
Awesome. Is this the first time?
This is actually, I don't even think we've announced it on the blog yet. So, like, this is actually the very first, like, announcement of any of this.
All right,
so I'm super
here
excited.
First. I might want to run this one first.
Yeah, breaking news.
Yeah.
So, the program with Module 1 starts out with kind of, again, the fundamentals, right? So, like, focusing on, semantic HTML, like CSS and kind of the organization of CSS and, like, writing, like, kind of performant CSS and looking at specificity and things along those lines. And, again, some of the kind of, like, JavaScript fundamentals and, like, some of the same, like, ideas from Module 1 in our current program, but like brought over to JavaScript. And then also thinking about like building responsive design from the ground up. Like one of the things they'll build is like kind of build your own like simple grid system, right? So that like you understand how it works and stuff along those lines, and like all the fun stuff on that level. Module 2 then kind of
Wait. I want to run back. So they build their own grid system in CSS, in JavaScript?
Yes, in CSS.
Clearly, I haven't gone through Turing School since I didn't know the answer to that question.
This will be starting May 9th, right? So just come hang out with us again.
Yeah, I'm planning on doing that sometime this year. You guys have a sweet setup.
Yeah, absolutely. Come by whenever you want.
Awesome.
We'll have 2 locations now, so you can kind of bounce back and forth too.
All right. I might favor the JavaScript one.
Me too. So yeah, I'm really excited about that one. And then the second module, second module actually looks a lot like the fourth one in our current program. One of my kind of favorite projects in the current fourth module is this project called Game Time, where it's basically they take some idea for a game, whether that be like, Connect 4 or Asteroids, or we've had Breakout built, and we've had actually like every like module, every like cohort that comes through like tends to build a more ambitious games than the one before. So we actually had like a kind of a Rock Band kind of clone, like very like with the timing and stuff. Somebody built a Ski Free. Is that the name of the app? Where it's like the skier, avoiding
the old Windows 3.1.
Yeah, like rebuilt that JavaScript. And I really like that because it kind of like forces you to like, first of all, it forces you to stop thinking about the DOM as like a place where you can just like hide all your state and like think about stuff, but like actually like start looking at like, how do I break this into objects and like organize my code in a really important way. And so that actually gets moved into like module 2 at this point. And so they'll build a lot of stuff with JavaScript. They'll look at like
the whole team building one together or each building their own?
No, I usually put it up into pairs. At that point.
Oh, that's awesome. Most of my learning has been, at least in the early stages, from building games.
Yeah, it's literally one of my favorite projects, and so I'm always like really excited about that. So they'll build that. They'll also then start to get a little bit of a familiarity with Node and Express, right? Because while it is predominantly a front-end engineering program, like in the same way that like you can't really be a Rails developer without like at least being able to like have some familiarity and like hold your own on the front end, I think the same is true. Right. So they'll kind of get some experience building applications with Express and stuff along those lines. We'll kind of then dive into some of the first. Yes, exactly. Right. So like it'd be helpful if you're learning how to consume an API in Ember that also how to like build said API, right? Or make changes to that API and feel comfortable in there. Even if your area of like specialty is in the front end, like being able to like be a like participant in the back end, I think is super important. I think the opposite is true.
Yeah, but also having that breadth of experience with just a little bit everywhere.
Exactly. Kind of looking at stuff like events and local storage and how non-blocking JavaScript works and what the event loop even is. And so stuff that we normally talk about in Module 4, as well as like kind of keeping in mind some of the stuff like Flexbox and some more advanced stuff, looking at stuff like SCSS and some like functional programming concepts using Lodash and stuff along those lines.
So we're only 2 modules in, and
only 2 months.
They could already probably be hireable.
Yeah, I'm really like excited and a little jealous about the students that are going to go through this program. So module 3 is like, again, if module 3 in the backend program is like professional Rails applications, I really believe that module 3 in this program is like professional client-side applications. So you're looking at build tools and process automation, like kind of getting familiar with like Grunt and Gulp and things along those lines. And then kind of looking at some more stuff like, actually building like JSON API compliant APIs. And like, yes, you can build an API, but like, how do you like design an API?
Right.
And then it's time to start looking at the framework. So we'll actually be teaching both React as well as Ember. And I feel really strongly about this because I think that both have a place, right? I've built many, many small Ember applications. And I think that there is a place if you're just using like some of the like view templating stuff, if it's a bunch of components, you're trying to like manage like rendering stuff on the page, that like React is a good choice for that. But I think as you and I were talking about in the beginning of this podcast when we quote unquote weren't recording, but it was part of the recording, is that, you see all these like posts now where it's like, I have too much choice in my React app and I feel overwhelmed by, do I use Flux or Redux or, what have you. Any of those, and like they're all really great, but I feel like at a certain point with all those things, like I've built a few apps like that, is that I'm always like slowly but surely like building my own Ember without the community support.
Right. And each of you is building a different Ember.
Build a slightly different one with slightly different decisions and like weirder edge cases that can show up. And like there's a certain point where it's like I feel like I should have just used Ember. Like this is something that I feel like
I mean, the good news is that with React you don't have to update every 6 weeks because no one else is updating it.
Yes, that's true. There's no pressure. Like your bespoke setup is not getting updates every 6 weeks. So that's some like pressure removed. That said, should you decide to update, I'm sure it will not be as easy as like the time I went from 1.8 to 1.13, and it took me about 20 minutes. But I feel like, yeah, you hear all this stuff, and it's like, I feel like it's something that the Ember community has figured out really like early on, right? So like starting with like Ember App Kit, and then like with the kind of the dream being realized with Ember CLI, which is like, you don't have to make these decisions. Right? Like here is a setup and it works, and a set of build tools, and it's handed to you. And one, like, you don't have to like build your own tool chain. And then two, you don't have to like sit there and evaluate everything, because everyone's using the same set of tools, which means everyone notices the same pains and edge cases. And those pains and edge cases tend to be like, dealt with. They tend to be worked on, right? So I think that like if I was building like a very like tiny like single like just like I've built some like just, like little musical instruments and stuff like that, like that maybe I would still use something like React for, but I think that like at a certain like level I would probably then always reach for Ember. So I think both have a place.
Well, I found even for like for me, even simple apps are very easy to make in Ember. Because you don't have to use all the complexity. Like I've had apps where I just stick everything in a component. And it's worked out great.
Yeah, at my old job, we basically made a bunch of interactive data visualizations, and it occurred to me early on, I was doing it in D3, and it occurred to me early on that it was like way easier to do this in Ember. So yeah, we made like 10 small Ember apps that were just like, yeah, a few components, and they had no backend. There was no API that they were pulling from. They started out with some base data, and as you changed different values in the visualization, like everything like changed and updated automatically, and it was like great. It was a really like pleasant way to work. And so yeah, I think it's really great. I think there's some people have built like static sites where it's just like, you know, in Ember and like that aren't like dynamically pulling from an API, and it's a really good experience, and it's a really like nice like development story.
Yeah, and there even there's some services now, I think Pagefront is the name of one of them, where you can just through the Ember CLI API just deploy it. And it's really easy, really cheap, and it's just up there. Yeah,
and it's like that's the great thing of like deploying like an Ember app, especially like if it's just standalone. It's just at the end of the day, it's an HTML file, a JavaScript file, and a CSS file, or two.
I guess you could connect to FTP and serve up your Ember file.
That's how we did it, right? We literally I just had like a SFTP slit like in my package JSON where I just did npm run deploy, and like it just pushed it up to like an Apache server serving static file, and that was it.
I'm thinking just like doing it manually, like those old FTP clients where you just like drag from one to the other.
Yeah, oh yeah, and then like it's one of those things where there is no version control, and then somebody like edits a file on the live server, and the entire thing goes down, and hopefully somebody like copied down the server like a week ago, and you can restore it from a backup. You know, the golden era of web development, if you will.
Right, and if you miss those days, you can recreate part of it now if you really want to.
Yeah. You don't. So talking about the two major, I just said two major. I was worried about offending Angular developers, but then I realized I'm on an Ember podcast. It's cool.
I'm sure we'll have some Angular developers hate listening to it.
That's fine.
Just like they get in their car, they rage.
Email Jeff. It's fine.
Yeah. I'll put my email here.
Yep. It's fine.
It'll be great.
So that's kind of like, I feel like, you know, tackling those two definitely will take up the large majority of that module. And then there is the fourth module, which I'm really like exuberantly excited about, which is web technologies outside the browser.
Oh, interesting. Do tell.
So there's there's three major focuses for this module. One of which is Electron.
Okay, yeah, the desktop.
Yeah, building like desktop applications that can interact with the operating system, be menu bar applications like access the file system and stuff. Building Electron applications.
So like Atom is built with JavaScript. So you could take your Ember app and create a desktop word processor if you really wanted to.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow.
Yeah, and you do some really, really great stuff. There's actually a really great talk scheduled for EmberConf 2016 about building Electron apps with Ember. And I think they're like this fantastic fit because, I mean, all Electron is, that's an oversimplification, but like one of the things Electron is basically mixing like kind of Chromium with Node, right? But that said, like if you think about like building an iOS or a OS 10 or Windows application, there's usually more there. They usually have like Cocoa to kind of like add the structure and like data modeling and stuff along those lines. And like Electron doesn't necessarily give you any of that out of the box, right? But Ember is like like explicitly like really good at that, right?
Yeah.
So like the kind of like there's like I think a really exciting prospect of using Ember with Electron to build some like really like fantastic applications using web technologies.
So do you get a URL in your desktop application if you use Ember Electron?
No, it's like it fires up. You can like spawn windows. You can actually have different like each window is its own process. Right, and you can actually have inter-process communication to like share information between them. But they are like you spawn a window, and you can point it like internally. You do point it at like an HTML file where you can like. But even in that HTML file, like if you had script tags, you can actually like require the FS module from Node, and it works.
So you can run Node stuff and Chromium stuff. That's what you were getting at earlier.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's really exciting, and like it's one of those things where it's one of those technologies, and I feel like WebSockets is a lot like this for me, where the first time you see it, it's like seems cool, don't really know what I would use it for, and then like 2 weeks later you find yourself walking down the street going, I would build this, and I would build that, and I would build this other thing, and like it opens up this entirely like new world of applications that you could build that you probably like haven't been thinking about, and it's like I feel like for me like incredibly exciting. So I'm excited for this EmberConf talk.
Right, and once you have Electron and WebSockets and local storage, you can make something that can run completely offline.
Yeah.
On your and you don't even have to have the page loaded because it's already on your computer.
Yeah, and like so you can have like a total offline experience, and then like, hey, go check this API if we have access, right? If we are online. But yeah, you could store stuff in either local storage, or if it was more than that, you could use level DB, right? Or like SQLite or something along those lines to store it as well.
Man, that's really cool.
Yeah.
How hard is it to get started with that?
Incredibly easy, actually. Like there's like a few things that you kind of need to learn, but it's actually like very, very simple to get started. And the Electron project has really fantastic documentation. I'm going to do a training at O'Reilly's Fluent Conference in March on building Electron apps. And so it's like a 3-hour thing where like we'll build like a few like kind of like the archetypal like applications, like possibly like a notes application or something along those lines. I'm still in like the planning process for it. But it's actually like the documentation is really great and like very, very easy to get started with it.
Awesome. Yeah, I just made a note to make a screencast about Electron.
Yeah, and there's a really great community around it already because it's all like you can like create like there's Electron. I'm gonna make some boo-boos here, but there's Electron pre-built where you can like pull down an already like compiled version, so you don't have to like build like V8 from scratch. And then I believe it's Electron compiler, which basically like automatically runs everything through Babel and handles all of your SCSS.
Ember CLI add-on.
So there is also, as of like a week or two ago, Ember Electron, Ember CLI add-on. I'm not sure if it's an Ember CLI add-on. I don't want to misspeak there. But like there is now like an officially, like somebody has released a library for like bringing Electron and Ember together. So that is actually true as of like a week ago.
Yes, awesome.
I have become aware of it.
Yes, you can say Ember install Ember Electron. Yeah, because it was an Ember Weekly.
Yes. So like the dream is like coming alive very quickly
Yeah.
for like building this really fantastic app, like truly, I really believe like truly like ambitious applications with both Ember and Electron. So they'll do that in Module 4, and then there's two other technologies we're going to play with. One is PhoneGap, or the Apache Cordova project, for like the same basic concept of like web applications wrapped in a native shell, so they have access to, you know, the camera and the GPS, and like, and the browser these days does have access to a lot of that, but like access to where you can like write apps that work on Android and iOS equally as well. And the same, like Electron runs on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS X.
And so you can stick it on the App Store.
Yeah. And then I think we're also going to play a little bit with React Native as well.
Yeah. So if you have something that needs a lot of performance.
So like using web technologies outside of the browser is like, I think, a topic that I'm just in generally really excited about. And I'm really kind of like excited for the skill set these students are going to have at the end of the program.
Yeah, because they're going to have, in that area, they're going to be better than 90% of the developers that are already on the market.
I'm biased, but I truly believe that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, like, I currently know far less than your students will about this subject.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
that's
excited.
really cool.
And well, the nice part is that at Turing, all of our curriculum is completely open source. Right. So like everything that, as we write this curriculum, as we build it, it is all going to be online for free. Like we put everything in a giant like GitHub repository of literally everything we do. Well, I wouldn't say a giant GitHub repository, several large GitHub repositories, but like there's nothing that we do that's private. So everything that we do, like every recording of like a lecture that we do, and, you know, usually it's just me firing up ScreenFlow and like on my laptop, like, but like every piece of curriculum that we write, everything goes on GitHub and is made completely free.
Awesome. And so we'll have a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
So, you know, like many open source projects, like we do have to work, I think, a little bit on organization of some of that stuff. So bear with us on that. And the front end stuff is like at this point a work in progress for the first half of this year. But like expect it there as it's developed, like it'll instantly go online. So the entire thing done out in the open.
Awesome. So yeah, if any of you listening are wanting to learn about some really cool stuff and you don't necessarily have the money or the time to go to Turing School, this is an awesome option.
Yeah.
And so I have some more questions specifically about teaching Ember. By the time that they're learning it in the current program, they'll have been going 5 months, right?
Something around that. Like, if not that, then a few weeks off in any direction. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's fairly early in someone's career, because you typically think of frameworks, and this is getting less and less so, as a more advanced thing. So how do they respond to learning Ember?
So I'm interested, like, how the new program will respond to it. It's always really, really interesting to teach it to people who have, like, most of their experience is Rails.
Right. Because it uses the same words, but...
Same words, but with very different meanings. Like, as we all know, like, Rails REST is kind of not really REST, and Rails MVC is not really MVC, and stuff along those lines. And so, like, you're saying these words, and, like, it's always, like, watching their faces as you can explain that, like, more than one controller can be, like, alive and active, and controllers can, like, communicate with each other to, like... get data from each other, right? It's just like... It
sort of felt like a swarm when I learned of it. It's like a swarm of Rails apps.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like that that several different, like, you know, I'll use the term views, right? Obviously, like you and I both know, it's more thinking about like components than views. But like in their minds, that many views can be active on the page, each backed by like a controller, right? Like from the Rails student perspective is kind of like bewildering. So like I'm interested. I think it might be easier to talk about that stuff if I don't have to like overload every word that they currently like feel like they were just starting to get comfortable with.
Right.
But that's definitely experience that we kind of like deal with now. And there's also like, you find yourself like, teaching this stuff while also like apologizing for some of JavaScript at the same time, right? Like, yeah, it's been a little like, I'm excited to like let the curriculum breathe a little bit more, because like there's also like definitely some difficulties. Like, not only like arrow functions solve this a little bit, but like not only do you have to like kind of teach about like actions and like controllers or something, you also then like have to talk about like dot bind this. Right, at the same time, which is like kind of...
Although, to be fair, I went a couple years doing professional JavaScript before I figured out what dot bind this was.
I think we all did. Yeah, that's definitely the case for me. I think it's one of those things where I feel like I have leveled up as a developer much more by kind of having to be able to answer like almost any question on a topic. So I feel like I've grown as, like, I've written less code in, like, the last year than I had the year prior to that, but I've probably, like, have a deeper conceptual understanding of everything that I don't think I would have had if I hadn't taken this job.
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean. Like, having to explain something in a screencast, you have to search out all the complexities of it, because if you don't, you'll probably get something wrong. And your job is even harder because you're going to have questions directed right at you, and you have to answer in real time.
Yeah, it's not like commenting or something like on the comment thread. It's like they're coming at you, and it's like they trust that you have the answer, right? And generally speaking, like, I would say it takes, and I'm interested to hear your experience preparing screencasts, but I would say it takes 3 times the length of a lesson to prepare it.
I would love to prepare a 5-minute screencast in 15 minutes. That would be awesome.
That's fair too, yeah. You do get some like economies of scale when you're at the 3-hour level, right?
That's true.
So like there are a few like, all right, we're all going to work on this in pairs and then kind of like review our solutions in 15 minutes. So like I do get some of those wins that you don't get in a screencast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say it
on
does
a good
take
day, it takes
hours.
15 minutes of recording to get 5 minutes of screencast.
I mean, that's impressive. I was doing like a 5-minute thing. It probably took me the better part of a day.
It used to take that.
I was like just making like a 5-minute thing on like model testing in Ember, and like I had the thing written out, right? Like I knew what I was talking about, but like every time like you listen to yourself and it's like, yeah, nope. Like I stumbled on my words there. All right. In a live situation, if you stumble on your words, you can kind of correct yourself and move along too. So there are some advantages to the live situation as well.
Yeah. I've started treating them more like a live situation where if it's a small error, I'll just like correct it midstream and keep going.
That's probably really important to your sanity.
Very much so. I remember the very first one I made like 2 years ago. I ended up chopping it every other word because I would mess up that often.
Yeah, definitely. Like I can definitely sympathize with that.
And then it ended up sounding like this because they were all chopped together. It was a good time.
Yeah, I imagine, right? But I think, always I think the other thing with like the current program is like you have students, like there are people who like, I remember the first time I started out with Ruby and Sinatra and Rails, and I remember the first time I played with jQuery, right, like years ago. And I remember the very first time that I did something where I was making AJAX calls or something along those lines and updating something on the page where I was like, all right, this is for me, right? I'm in.
It felt like magic.
And I think we teach it, and I think it's really super important that we teach it in the backend program. But I also think like there are some students who are like, I love this, I'm in. And there are some students who are like, I'm interested in learning this stuff. I think it's valuable, but I like the back end, and that's cool. Yeah. So I think it's also going to be fun teaching some of this stuff, like, in a kind of like a self-selecting group of like people who feel very much like I feel about working in the browser. Like for me, like the web as a platform is like literally the most exciting thing in the world, that I can build something and it's just like, I just hand people a URL.
Yeah.
Right.
And
like, and they can touch and like move this thing. It's like, for me, it's just like fascinating and like mind blowing. All right. And it's like, it's the reason that like, I've never had like a deep desire to like learn like actual like Objective-C or like Swift or something along those lines. I'm like, why would I limit myself to like this platform when I can build for the web? Like, I'm definitely one of those people who is a strong believer in the web and in the open web in particular, and like greatly like enjoys its existence.
Oh, I definitely agree with you there. I would go crazy if I had to program something 3 times for 3 different platforms.
Yeah. And I think that like for a large company, like having those native apps is really good, but like for many small shops, right, being able to build once for 3 platforms is an incredibly powerful thing as well.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, we're getting towards our time today. Before we go, so what type of student should apply to Turing School?
So it's one of those things where sometimes it's like, oh, you all work us so hard. It's like, yeah, like, because we promised to make you developers in 7 months, and like feel the need to own up to that promise, right? So I think it's definitely somebody who has, decided like this is a field that they want to get into, but definitely like understands that like we're not like relaxing on like the quality of like the developers we want to put out just because it's a 7-month program. Right. So it's like we're going to turn up the intensity to make you a really solid developer at the end of the 7 months, but it's going to be a very, very, very intense 7 months.
Right. I mean, like, if anything, it's more intense because you go to a 10-week one, like you can sort of be like, all right, I am 5 weeks away, I'm 4 weeks away, and then you can collapse.
Yeah.
But 7 months is a long time.
Very long time. And like we try to like, we have intermission weeks every 6 weeks to get some, but like they're not like weeks off. Like there's stuff you need to be doing during those weeks, but they're not as intense. Like it's not really an intermission. I'm like, yeah, again, I've made you promises that I intend on keeping. Right. So I think it's definitely somebody who like, I feel like it's very important that a student knows what they're getting into, right? It's like if this is something where it's like, yeah, it looks like a lucrative career. I think it might be, like, I could do that, right? Like, this is probably not for you, right? Yeah. But if it's like, if you want this really badly and are willing to like really maybe work the hardest you've ever worked for, I mean, it all depends on like what we've done previously, but like, working really, really hard for 7 months to achieve this goal, then I think this is the right fit for you.
And that's a great thing to select for because they're going to have to work really hard for most of the rest of their career, but especially during that first year. Yeah. Yeah. So are you guys hiring teachers or developers as well?
Absolutely. We're starting a new program.
All right.
Right. So we are like currently, we would like to have, 2 or 3 instructors for at least even like starting this program. Right. We plan on, having it grow to be current like model where like in the backend program, there are 4 modules, and at any given point there, a quarter of our student body is in module 1, a quarter of them in module 2, so they're like slightly overlapping. We haven't really officially decided whether or not we're going to do that. I think we're leaning towards doing the same thing with the front end program, but that means that like currently the only staff member signed on to do that is me. Right. So I need
some extra helpers.
Yeah, I need some help. So yes, definitely reach out to steve@turing.io if everything you've heard about over the last half an hour sounds like as exciting to you as it does to me. I would love to talk to you. We are definitely hiring for that program.
Awesome. And so what type of person should apply for that?
Very much the type of person who might otherwise consider being a student, right? It is like the thing, like they're on the students are on kind of like the receiving end of this, but like it is definitely, I like to explain it to people as I have never loved my job so much in my life before, but I have never worked so hard before.
Yeah, because you're in there with the students 12 hours a day.
Mm-hmm. I'm in there with them, like, I'm answering questions, and it's also one of those things where it's like, while I'm at work, I'm teaching, right? Mm-hmm. Like, which means, like, I'm lesson planning a lot of times, like, outside of the workday, right?
That sounds a lot like a normal teacher's...
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I came from K-12 education, so for me, it's, like, all I know, right? Like, I've been in education now for like 10 years. Mm-hmm. Like a few years those were as a developer at like an educational nonprofit or something, but like I started my career the first 7 years of that as a New York City public school teacher, right? So it's for me all I know. So it doesn't seem to be like, but it's like a big deal for me. But it's definitely like I love my job so much, but like it is definitely like a lot of work. So I would say if you're passionate about teaching and like willing to like understand that trade-off where it's like, and it's really great. Like my boss Jeff Casimir teaches as much as I do.
So everyone in the organization is teaching.
So like it's a really great environment to work in, but it is definitely like we take what we do very seriously.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a great place to work.
I like it.
If you want to learn, go apply to be a student. If you want to help other people learn, apply to be a teacher.
And you'll also end up learning as a teacher too, right? Like I said, I definitely have much deeper like understanding of like a very wide range of topics like than I had coming in.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, this is After Recording. We have a special announcement from Steve Kinney.
After dark. The other thing I want to talk about real quick is that we're running a JavaScript conference in Denver on June 24th, 2016, kind of focused on like a one-day single-track conference focused, I think, on JavaScript in general. I think one of the things I would love to like kind of highlight is like doing creative things with JavaScript, like making art, making music, anything that's kind of like super like interesting. That's not just like putting stuff in databases and taking it back out again. And I think like also talking about like emerging things. Like I would love to have talks on like HTTP2 and like stuff along those lines where it's like kind of emerging technologies and like creative uses of code with JavaScript both on the server and in the browser. And so I'm really excited about that and kind of putting that all together. We have not opened the CFP yet. Hopefully by the time this is released, the CFP will be open. We haven't like set a firm date for that yet. But I would, I encourage anyone listening to submit a proposal. I'm excited to have a really great lineup. We've got, some great organizers. Jen Schiffer is going to be the MC, which I'm super excited about. So I think it's going to be a really like fantastic conference, and I would love to see all of your great proposals and anyone in the area or who wants to come to Denver to come and attend as well.
Awesome. That sounds exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be a good year. I'm pumped.
Awesome. Well, hopefully I'll see you there. This is the end of the show, but here's a message from our sponsor. Our sponsor who happens to be me. So I run ember-screencasts.com. If you're an intermediate level developer, then this site is for you. So you've read your introductory book and you're ready to get started, but you're not quite into reading the source code yet. So I go and I explain some of the basics, but I also explain cool add-ons and some intermediate to advanced topics as well. So go ahead and check out ember-screencasts.com. 2 screencasts released every week for the intermediate Ember developer. I hope to see you there.